All systems go. Check it out.
You're listening to Fight Society with Damon Martin and Jeremy Lober.
Check it out.
All right, man, isn't it tragic? Tom Petty, man, 66 years old. I got news for the Grim Reaper right now, dude. You have overstayed your welcome, okay? Taken too many people this year.
Been a rough one.
It has been a real, like, if you, especially for, like, rock and roll music.
Yeah.
David Bowie. Who's on the tip of my tongue that we just barely lost?
Chester Bennington.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, Chris Cornell. You kind of forget those guys because in the tragic manner that they went, but
still gone.
Yeah, Chris Weidman's walkout.
Yeah, this is Chris Weidman's walkout song for a long time. He paid tribute to Tom Petty yesterday on Twitter, which I thought was cool, with Tom Petty passing away, and this has been Chris Weidman's walkout for many, many years. Kind of hard to, it's like one of those things you associate with a fighter. Like you always associate this song with Chris Weidman now, because he always walks out to it. So
yeah, 100%, totally,
which is awesome.
So yeah, you're right. Chester Bennington, Chris Cornell. Oh gosh, this website, I'm on, what is it, Loudwire? Yeah. They have like tons of people, like Jane Train, like they're going to really litter up the rockers who have died.
Oh, rock,
yeah, just with people you've never heard of.
The guy from Husker Du just passed away recently, the drummer from Husker Du. Yeah, that's a legendary band.
Ooh, Greg Allman.
Greg Allman, yeah.
That's kind of crazy. Well, it's just in conjunction with all these other people, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like, a lot of the classic rock guys, minus Keith Richards, that everybody, kind of like, okay, these guys are going to die pretty soon. I mean, everybody's kind of starting to knock off. Like here in Columbus, you said you had tickets to go see Seeger the other night.
He didn't die, though. But
I know, but he, what did he do? He, twisted his ankle?
No, he had a pinched nerve in his neck or something like that. So that's
got to be close to death at that age. You pinch a nerve in the neck.
Knock it off,
oh
Seeger.
My God. I love Seeger. He's actually one of the bigs that I've never seen.
That's why I wanted to go see him.
Oh, no, he's great. I kind of hope. Obviously, I hope he lives. For
this is
many
like
reasons.
The most morbid. Like I want to see him before he dies. Like,
well, for sure. I mean, you want to see it.
I never saw Bob Dylan. Still haven't seen Bob Dylan. He's still kicking.
Man, I've heard about seeing Bob Dylan these days, and it's not the best.
Not the same Bob Dylan.
Oh, well, I haven't heard that it's great for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see Jacob Dylan. We documented that a few weeks ago on the podcast. Yeah, I remember I was at the Columbus Zoo.
Of all places.
Yeah, how weird is that?
Didn't they play with Better Than Ezra? Wasn't that the
Better Than Ezra? Yeah, those you
forget. Living with you.
Oh, Chuck Berry this year. Chuck Berry was 90.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when you get to 90. At that point, you lived a pretty good life. Like Hugh Hefner,
nobody's feeling terrible for you.
Hugh Hefner passed away in 91, and I was like, that's a dude who lived life to the fullest, right there. You know what I mean? Like, you're sad he's gone, but at 91, you're kind of like, you know what? He's lived it, man. He lived it. He lived the life.
Yeah, and of course, opening the show without mentioning the tragedy in Las Vegas and how our thoughts and just prayers and everything is going out to all of the people that were involved, that were victims. I mean, from police, the first response teams, I mean, just the absolute heroes out there, just prayers and thoughts. And I hope everybody that was involved can have, at the end of the day, some kind of peace of mind.
Yeah, I mean, you see these stories. I mean, 59 people dead, more than 500 wounded. It's all sad, but then you got to look at you look at the stories of people coming together. They literally had to turn people away. Donating blood because so many people showed up to donate blood yesterday. They actually had to stop and say come back tomorrow because so many people had shown up. You hear stories. I think what was the guy's name? It was Chris Anderson. I want to get the guy's name wrong, but he was a kid who was at the concert and he saved 30 people and then got shot himself. He survived.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But
those stories are heartbreaking.
And then you read about some of the people who died in the thing. I read a story last night on BuzzFeed about one of the people who died. It was a husband who jumped on top of his wife when the gunfire started.
Yeah, the guy from Tennessee.
And he got shot and obviously passed away, and he protected his wife. You hear those kind of stories, it's just man, it's heartbreaking. And Vegas is so close to, obviously it's the home of the UFC. UFC 216 takes place there this weekend. I always call Vegas my home away from home because I spend so much time there. I know Vegas so well. I go there, 9 times a year. So it's like this, even though it's not my hometown, it feels like it hits close to home because it's like, I've been there.
When you know an area so well and you could say, man, I've stood in that place and whoa, it's just a scary thought, the whole thing. So like I said, thoughts and prayers go out. First business at hand, easy for me to say, Johnny Hendricks heading to the Jackson Wink camp. What do you think?
I think it's a good move. I think the thing that Johnny has been missing lately is a really good team around him. I think everyone knows that he left his old management team and Team Takedown, they kind of built camps around him. And he'd had some struggles with that, and he left those guys. And then, he had been training at, the Oklahoma State Wrestling Room and doing some other stuff like that. But you just really wonder what kind of training he was getting, how thorough it was, what kind of sparring partners he had. I don't think anyone is going to get worse training under Greg Jackson and Mike Winkeljohn. I think you can only get better. And I think the quality of, sparring partners, training partners.
Goes up, times a million.
Yeah.
So he's fighting at 185. So who else is there at 185?
At 185,
you got Brian Stan retired.
Yeah, Brian Stan retired. Derrick Brunson is part-time there. He's fighting Lyoto Machida coming up. He's there. I looked at actually what's funny is I actually looked at the Jackson Wink gym list a couple weeks ago. So it's man, I can't remember how many people train there now. When you look at the list, it's pretty extensive. Guys,
but their training is weird. It's not so much home gym anymore. Type things guys are just going out for camps. Cowboys established his own camp. John Jones, God knows what's gonna go on with that. So it's kind of weird. You're starting to see some of the old staples, so to speak, kind of cycle out because with the announcement of Matt Brown retiring, I know that he was on with you last week, which was a great episode, by the way. Cowboy Cerrone has to be within the next couple of years as well. So it's interesting.
I don't know about Cowboy. Cowboy's one of those guys who got to feel like he's going to fight until there's no fight left in him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Just but inevitably. What is he? I'm 37, so I think Cowboy's 35, 34, something like that.
Yeah,
so,
but
that conversation starts in another 3-4 years.
Yeah, it does. No, it does. But I think Hendricks. I think this is a good move. It shows that he's serious about getting better. It shows that he's serious about bouncing back. I don't know that 4 weeks at Jackson's is really going to help him ultimately come back from what he's dealt with the weight cutting issues. And then, at UFC 217, he's taking on this guy named Paulo Borrachino, who is just a freaking beast.
That guy's a killer, too.
10-0, 2-0 in the UFC, two knockouts. That's a dangerous guy to fight, especially off Hendricks coming off getting knocked out by Tim Boach.
But that was such a mismatch. That was Pride-style mismatch. Tim Boach and Johnny Hendricks. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Dude is legit 205. Johnny's a 170er. Come on, let's be honest.
Yeah, he got knocked around.
I'm like, that was 2 weight class difference there. And that's why they have weight classes. Come on, let's be honest.
But Johnny's had his struggles, because I think Johnny is a natural welterweight. He's just never been able to get his body under control to keep it there. And so now he's fighting a middleweight as a very undersized middleweight. He's 5'9".
Well, I think he saw what's real. You saw in his younger part of his career, he could make the weight certain times. And then as he got older, your body changes, the bones get bigger.
But I think with Johnny, it's different though, because I think that he's
self-control.
Yeah, he let himself get away from it because there's guys. Look at Matt Brown. Not to keep coming back to him. Matt's what is Matt 35, 36? He's still. It's always a tough cut. It's never easy.
But he was never body fat.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Discipline. I understand the point of getting older, adding size. I get all that. I totally agree with that. But I think, Johnny didn't really even come to prominence until he was in his 30s. You know what I mean? He didn't really even come.
No, you're right. Yeah.
It's only been think about that. That's the guy who fought George St. Pierre. The last time George St. Pierre fought 4 years ago was Johnny Hendricks. UFC was at 167
the
in
best
Vegas.
Johnny Hendricks.
That was when he fought GSP, lost a real controversial decision, then comes back and beats Robbie Lawler to become the champion. That's 4 years. That's less than 4 years ago. So it's not like this guy is just
How old is Johnny?
He's in his 30s. Yeah. I don't know how old he is, but he's in his 30s. But just think about that. 4 years ago. Less than 4 years ago when you think about Willie when he's at his peak. When he was on that streak when he's knocking out Martin Kampman and all those guys. But you think about the loss to GSP and then he goes on that, where he goes out there and beats Robbie Lawler and has his, wins his title. So we're talking about 2014. It's 3 years ago.
34. Can that be right?
Yeah.
Is he only 34 years old?
I think that sounds about right. 35. I thought he was maybe 35, but yeah, that sounds about right. But I mean, think about that. 4 years. So, or 3 years, really, when you look at the Lawler fight. So it's like, I understand, I mean, listen, there's no right or wrong way when somebody falls off in this sport. You know what I mean? Like, there's no predictor. You know what I mean? Like, you look at a guy like, it's like Chuck Liddell, who is a legend. You know what I mean? The guy used to have a concrete chin. I mean, the guy could get hit by anybody, and he would just look. It was like getting flicked. You know what I mean? Like he would just look at you, be like, "You hit me, bitch. Here's a hit. Here's a right hand right back at you." As he got later in his career, he started taking more damage. He got knocked out by Rampage. He got knocked out by when it came to the end of his career, he got knocked out by Rashad. Remember that one? There's no perfect answer of when they got to go. You know what I mean?
I lost a lot of money on that fight.
On Rashad and Chuck? Mm-hmm. I was at that fight.
Betting with my heart.
I was at that fight. I remember I've never, in all the years and the almost 15 years I've been covering the sport, I have never heard a crowd go more silent than when Chuck Liddell got knocked out by Rashad Evans. He got clocked.
Well, that was at the height of the Iceman. Everybody's like, this is the dude. But he had been fighting a little too long, because that's what always happens. It's like, in the fight game, like, you're so popular at the wrong time. It's the oldest you've ever been. And it's like, oh man, this is dangerous. But everybody starts talking about all the old stuff you used to do.
Yeah.
And the Iceman legend was like at an all-time high. It was like equal to Stone Cold in wrestling. This was like the guy, the legitimate, just absolute killer. Oh, I heard he went to jail. Like all this. I heard he does coke all night before the fight. He doesn't even care. He's an animal. Yeah.
Right hand.
But what do you hear about this, though? Like, what's the deal with Chuck coming to fight in Bellator? I mean, like, I pray that's not true.
I've heard the rumor. I mean, I know that there's legit interest, at least, in terms of, Chuck coming back, whether or not how interested Bellator would be in him. I think Bellator started to learn their lesson a little bit when they put on that Shamrock Gracie fight. And
that was ridiculous.
I
forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah. Because what you don't want to do as an organization, because Bellator has built such a great, foundation of fighters now. I mean, because they went in the right direction when they signed guys like Rory McDonald.
You're right.
And Lorenz Larkin, guys like that.
What do you think? What do you think that, like, there's a possibility that they never anticipated the UFC I don't want to say the UFC definitely hasn't fallen off, but like there's holes in the game more than there was when Bellator started making those crazy fights. Like, I kind of think that they were headed down that road, and then they were like, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Like, we can go legit. Hang on a second.
Yeah. When they started getting some of the legit free agents, I think you saw that. And, when they signed Benson Henderson, they signed Rory McDonald, and, guys like that. Yeah. And they're filling the coffers with names and, solid names. They're not overspending on people. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at the payroll from this last Bellator card, which is a great card, they're not overpaying for guys. You know what I mean? Like, they're getting guys. But what Bellator offers that the UFC doesn't right now is that guys get sponsors, which is a big deal. So a guy making $50K in Bellator may not sound like a lot more money than what he's making in the UFC. Like, I'm just saying hypothetically, I think Benson Henderson made 50 or 60K.
But at first glance,
for his last fight, which, that's pretty comparable to what I think he was making in the UFC. And you're like, whoa, what was so bad about the UFC? Why did you leave? Because when you tack on sponsors and you're making 10, 20, 30 grand a fight, and not everyone does that, but like, I know for a fact Ryan Bader, who was making like 75 or 80K a fight, 80 and 80, let's say, 80,000 to fight, 80,000 to win in the UFC. Now, 160 grand, that sounds good. But then he's leaving, and I know for a fact he was leaving another 80 grand on the table. He had sponsors willing to pay him 75, 80 grand a fight. So when you think about it that way, 160 grand to win, and then you're leaving another, you could be making 250 easy. That's where the difference comes in with what
Bellator. That's a big deal.
So Bellator may only be offering the exact same money as the UFC, but then for some fighters, not everyone's going to benefit. But some fighters, like the Rory McDonalds of the world, the Ryan Baders of the world, when you can tack on an extra 50K a fight, when you're going to be making, 10K maybe in Reebok sponsorship at the UFC, I mean, 40K, 50K, that's a lot of money. And fighters have a very short shelf life. What you're making now, in theory, is going to last you for many, many years to come.
Yes. That's the rest of your life.
Like, think about what 40 grand means to you and me. You know what I mean?
Oh,
if somebody's like, oh, by the way, Loper, your morning show's going really, really well, but you're going to cut your pay by 40 grand a year. You're cool with that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you'd think, whoa, what am I going to do? What's going to happen?
You know what I mean? Like that's how severe it is for some of these guys. And so Bellator is offering them that. And while I know for a fact Bellator sponsorships aren't as lucrative on the whole as UFC because they don't have the exposure and they're not as big. They're big, but they're not as big as the UFC. Then, that's the name of the game for certain guys. Not, like I said, it doesn't work for everybody. Not everyone's going to go to Bellator and automatically all the sponsors are going to be like, oh my God, we're going to pay you, exorbitant amounts of money. But for certain guys like Roy Nelson, who just recently left and went over there, had a big win a couple weeks ago. Yeah, if you can make 50, 60 grand on sponsorships, makes sense.
Can I just back it up one time? Jay Giles passed away, 71 this year.
Did he pass away this year?
Lost him. Lost him so fast you didn't even know it.
Little centerfold action?
Like an angel in the centerfold. And you speak of angels and centerfolds, ladies and gentlemen, maybe one of the sexiest on the UFC roster. Derrick Lewis, Black Beast, standing by with Damon Martin. Let's go one-on-one to maybe the sexiest angel in the centerfold. Derrick Lewis, the Black Beast here, Fight Society Podcast.
And how's everything with you?
Oh, it's good. Heading back from Austin.
Oh, good stuff, man.
Out there.
Good stuff, man. Well, I appreciate you taking time to chat with me as always.
No problem at all.
So how's everything, man? I wanted to kind of start off by asking you about the, the stuff you were doing in Houston a few weeks back with the hurricane, man. I didn't talk to you around that time, but I was just so impressed with everything you did, man. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
How is everything in Houston now?
Yeah, everything just really coming back to normal, going back to normal. A couple of streets just finally opened up this week. People's houses really still tore up real bad right now, though.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think it's awesome that you stepped up for your community. I know how much you love Houston, and it felt like you really wanted to go out there and help everyone you could.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what it is. It didn't matter who they was. It just felt good just doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, fight is just around the corner, literally a week away from now, man. How has training camp been going for this one?
Training been going real well. I'm training harder than I did my last fight. My last few fights, actually. So my last few, I really haven't trained, put in the conditioning work like I should have. And really almost just barely getting by with the training that I was doing. And, I believe everything happened for a reason. If I would have been wrong with the type of training that I was going through, then I would never have become a champion by training the way I did. And everything happened for a reason.
Yeah. You said very frankly after the last fight, I mean, you even talked about, the possibility of retiring, and you were dealing with some injuries and stuff like that. I mean, how much better do you feel right now mentally and physically going into this one?
Yeah, I feel real good. I gave myself the chance to train the hardest I ever did, eat best I ever have, and just putting all the cards on the table. I'm giving myself a chance. Shouldn't be nothing, no excuses, anything like that. No if, woulda, coulda, shoulda, or nothing like that. So we'll see how everything goes.
Yeah. How was that?
I'm excited to see how this Derrick Lewis perform as well.
Yeah. What's the biggest difference in training? Is it the conditioning? Is it just, you tell me, like, what's the biggest difference you're feeling now versus, like, let's say your last fight? Like, what's the biggest difference?
My last few fights, the only thing I really did was just do pad work and Stairmaster. That's about it. That's all I did. Nothing, no jiu-jitsu, no running, no jogging, and nothing like that. That's all I've been doing the last 2 years.
Oh, wow. That's it.
Yeah. No running at all.
So kind of give me an idea of what this camp's been like.
It's pretty much the same thing. Stairmaster, running, hitting pads, doing jiu-jitsu, eating right. Finally eating right. That's probably the longest I ever went consistently. eating a healthy diet.
Yeah.
You know, and I got a strength and conditioning coach. I'm back with him. You know, I haven't had one in 2 years. I started with him when I first started my UFC career. Then he moved away. He just moved back a few months ago, and now we've been on the road ever since.
Nice. So when you come out of that last one, I mean, obviously, you know, you can get any number of opponents, and I know you've always told me it's never really about the opponent. You like the ranked guys because that means you're going to get closer to a title, and closer to a title means better money. Were you happy that you got a guy like Fabricio Werdum coming off that last fight?
Yeah, for sure. I had called, my managers, and we all had tried to set that fight up before. I believe last year, whenever Kane got injured, and Fabricio had turned the fight down, and now he's calling me a chicken and this and that, and saying that I won't fight him. And I told the UFC, I would like to fight Fabricio since he's calling me a chicken. But they already know that he already turned the fight down with me last year before.
What do you think of a guy when something like that happens? Because I remember that when Kane, the neck injury thing, I remember that when he had to drop out of that fight and Fabricio didn't have an opponent and all that kind of stuff, and now he's coming back and saying these things about you. I mean, does that, I don't know if it gives you more motivation or makes you just like the guy less, but I mean, what do you think when an opponent says that kind of stuff?
Oh, nothing at all. He's the type of guy that really just, he's a jokester, so I don't care about that. He can say anything you want. That don't mean anything. No, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Did you see him get into it with Tony Ferguson yesterday?
Yeah, I just seen it today.
What'd you think about that?
I believe he's just frustrated. You know, he should be main card or somebody's card, and I feel like that. He's feeling like the UFC is really pushing him out the way. You know, I also think that he thinks it's an easier fight for him than the Mark Hunt fight, because he was supposed to, Mark Hunt had wanted to fight him. He told Mark Hunt no, he didn't want to fight him, saying that he's not going to be ready in time. And the same week, he wound up calling me out instead of fighting Mark before Mark signed his fight contract.
Yeah.
And so he's just going to... I got news for him. I ain't gonna be the same fighter you seen me in my last fight. My last few fights, even the fights that I won.
Yeah, you'll
see a big difference in me, in my body shape and everything.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of your fights in the UFC, you've had such a dominant ground game. Anytime the fight goes to the ground, you've really punished guys and put them out. Obviously, everyone knows Fabricio for his jiu-jitsu, what he does on the ground with his jiu-jitsu, but you faced a guy in Gabriel Gonzaga who is a world-class jiu-jitsu guy. Obviously, you knocked him out. How confident are you if this fight goes to the ground that you can not only stay out of his submissions, but you can punish him for it?
Oh yeah, I'm hoping that he does pull guard. Even if he pull guard, I'm still the type of whole head guy that's gonna right in his guard and still try to knock him out.
Yeah. What have you thought of Fabricio's last couple fights? I mean, he got knocked out by Stipe, no shame in that. Obviously, he had the fight with Travis Brown, and then he had the fight with Overeem, which was kind of an ugly fight. But I mean, what do you think of Werdum in terms of what he's looked like recently?
I don't know. He's really up and down. You never know what you're going to expect with him. Sometimes he's going to come out with a flying kick. Sometimes he's not. Sometimes he's just going to be a stationary target. He really don't. A lot of his fights, he don't move around as much. He just walks. He's around 235 or something like that. He doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't move like he's 235. He moves like he's heavier than that. I don't know. I believe it's just slow for me.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to have the same speed to keep up with me.
Yeah. Well, I saw another interview you talked about you're going to be moving around like a welterweight in there.
Yeah, that's the goal is right now. Actually, I'm going to another training session right now. I'm trying to making sure my conditioning is on point. I'm feeling, I'd say about 90%. I'm having a little bit of a knee issue right now, but everything should be fine and dandy this time next week.
Yeah. Do you kind of feel like, with, everything you talked about, the last 2 years of your training, I mean, do you feel like this will be the best Derrick Lewis we've ever seen?
Yeah, for sure. Because people probably don't believe me, but that's one of the reasons why I was keep telling everybody I wanted to break, because I hate training. That was one of the things I needed to break out, but just tired of training, especially after the Manila fight got canceled. It just really knocked all the air out of me. And having to motivate myself to try to train again for a main card fight. That's going to be my first fight, main card fight. Then I have to train extra hard because it's going to be 5 rounds. Then a fight after that, another 5 rounds. And I was just getting burnt out on training. My body just wanted some time off and just being frustrated.
Yeah. So you feel like you got the time off and everything you need, and obviously this one's also back down to 3 rounds, so it's not quite as intense.
Yeah, for sure, but I'm even more excited that it's even 3 rounds, and I don't really have to hold nothing back. I have to worry about my back giving out or anything like that, and just go out there and try to finish this guy in 3 rounds. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. How is that?
I missed them 3 rounds.
Most of your opponents didn't make it 3 rounds, though, Derrick. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I miss them.
How is the back? I know that was something you said that it kind of plagued you for a lot of your career. How is that?
I believe it's pretty good right now. I just got it just leaving Austin, Texas. The guys out there at Onyx, they was working on me. Working on my back and working on my mobility and everything like that, making sure it doesn't go out on me again at this fight. So we'll see. I'm feeling good.
Yeah. Do you feel like, obviously Mark Hunt, I have nothing but the utmost respect for the guy, but Fabricio Werdum is a former champion. Obviously he's been, at the top of this division for the past few years. You feel like you get a knockout over him, you get a big win over him, it kind of puts you right back to where you want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I believe Mark Hunt should have beat Fabricio. And to be honest with myself, ain't no way in the hell I should have lost to Mark. If I would have took that fight serious, trained like I have now, and my body in the same position like it is right now, ain't no way I should have lost the fight. But, it really lit a fire under my butt. Something I needed. I needed some type of motivation, because winning 6 fights in a row, half-ass training, that really put you in a different place mentally, especially preparing for a high-level fight like I've been doing, and so I just had to humble myself again, Yeah. So I'm gracious for that.
Yeah. Well, you get by, like I said, if you're winning and you're doing, if you say you're going half speed and you're still winning, why would you change? You know what I mean? That's just the nature of who we are as people, right? That's our nature, If you get by doing half speed, why would you try? Why would you do something different?
Yeah, I know. But, the MMA world say, oh, no, you need to be eating healthy and need to be training full time, 3 times a day, getting your rest and this and that. No. I was still eating fried chicken, hamburgers, all of that fight week. The day of the fight, I'm still eating the same way my whole career. And now I just want to see how I feel whenever I get in there. I just want to see what's the difference is.
Yeah, but now
all the big fuss about.
So now be honest though. You changed all the nutrition, everything after the fight. You got to be honest. You're gonna have some good food though, right? You're gonna have to go back.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. My mouth is watering right now. Thinking about some Carl's Jr. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm starving right now, man. It's damn salad food. You eat salad, you hungry the next 30 minutes ain't hungrier than what you was before you ate the damn salad.
Yeah, see
that's what I don't like about it. I can't see how people do this every day.
You got to. That's how you get motivated. You take it out on Fabricio Werdum. You go out there and say, "You made me. Look how many cheeseburgers you made me miss," and just hammer him a couple more times.
Yeah, yeah. The damn McRib was in town. I had to miss the McRib, and all that. Damn, my favorite restaurant had a special going on. I couldn't even eat it. Shit.
Verdum's got to pay. Verdum's got to pay.
Yeah, somebody got to pay. Somebody got to pay.
I love it. Derrick, it's always a pleasure, man. You know I love catching up with you. You know I love talking to you. I really appreciate the time, man. As I say this in every time we do an interview, and I know I say it every single time, but I still say this. You do still have the best social media in the UFC. I saw your Paige Van Zant advice. I was impressed by that, and
yeah. My phone was hacked. Actually, it was hacked.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Derrick, it's always a pleasure, man. Obviously, safe training the rest of the way these last couple of days, man. Safe travels out to Vegas, man. Best of luck in the fight. And I always appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate you, man. No problem.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
My friend, Derrick Lewis. I mean, good job, dude. Getting some out of the Black Beast.
Derrick Lewis always makes me laugh.
That dude is not only hilarious, but I mean, he's like, if you were going to have a fighter take over your Twitter account to make it better, or your Instagram to make it better, he would be the number one voted fighter.
That was my favorite quote from that interview when he talked about, I asked about the Paige Van Zant thing where he did that, and he said, my Twitter was hacked. Joking. Of course, Derrick Lewis is the best. Like, it's so, dude, that dude cracks me up every single time I interview him. He's hilarious, and he's just a nasty beast inside the cage.
He's got a nasty matchup on Saturday, man.
I know, Fabricio Werdum's no joke.
And this is a guy who has had some roadblocks.
Yeah.
He had like a clear shot to the title. I mean, the guy was, you're looking at former champion, not that long ago. And he wants to be back in that spot, you can tell. And a win over Derrick Lewis makes him look serious about that. I think, obviously it does a lot more for Black Beast if he goes and knocks off Werdum.
Time is ticking away on Werdum. He's 40 now. I think he's going on 40. Yeah, he's going on 41.
So going back to that age conversation,
Yeah.
that's a real number right there,
Yeah,
40.
You wonder, like I said, at some point, man, it happens to everybody. Age catches up to everybody. And while there are ageless wonders in our sport, like Randy Couture and Dan Henderson, those guys that caught up to them too, though, you know what I mean? For as legendary as Randy was, eventually, Lyoto Machida's front kick to the face will knock that age right out of you. And, Dan Henderson, I mean, listen, Dan Henderson is one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time. And there's no question. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer in any Hall of Fame for mixed martial arts. Still pisses me off he didn't get inducted last year to the UFC Hall of Fame. But
they just let him into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
it's
so
remarkable.
But he went through a pretty, tough stretch. You know what I mean? Like, he had some tough losses. He had this, couple fights with Vitor, and you know what I mean? Like, he had some losses. Now he came back, obviously had the big win over Hector Lombard, had the title fight against Michael Bisping to kind of close out his career. But he went through a tough stretch as well. And when you get to that age 40, I mean, like I said, man, Dana White says this all the time. And it's true, fighting is a young man's sport, you know what I mean, or a young woman's sport. It's not a sport that's kind to you as you get older. Now, heavyweights have typically been able to perform a little longer as they get a little older, but Verdum's 40. Time's ticking on that guy, you know what I mean? Time's ticking. There's not going to be that much left, you know what I mean? Look at Anderson Silva, legend, 41. The time, it catches up to everybody, man.
And you gotta, the idea of bowing out at the right time is, just so clutch. There's so much research out there now, it's just scary. I don't even want to get into the CTE conversation, but this fight with Werdum and Derrick Lewis, I think is going to steal the card, to be honest with you.
That's a great fight. That's a really, really interesting fight. I really like that fight. I mean, listen, I make no bones about it. My favorite fight on this card is Ferguson and Lee. Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee.
Nasty fight. Just a nasty fight between two motherfuckers who love to fight, who grew up fighting, who just know one thing, how to settle business, and that is inside that octagon.
There are two fights that are scheduled on paper, like, done, signed contracts that I'm most looking forward to for the rest of this year. And one of them is Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw.
Yep.
And the other one is Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee. And I understand people are going to say that, Kevin Lee isn't as highly rated and he hasn't had as many top 10 wins. I don't care because Kevin Lee is a badass and this is going to be an amazing fight. I don't care
because Kevin Lee is a badass is the greatest response of all time.
This is going to be a great fight. You know what I mean?
Zero fucks because that dude is boss. Okay.
Exactly.
That's what Damon's saying to you.
Exactly. Fuck off if you don't agree. But it's going to be a great fight. Stylistically, these guys are going to scrap, and it's going to be a great freaking fight. Like, I am legit. Like, is it a big fight? Is it a, one of those monumental fights that you're going to talk about and you're going to call your buddies and you got to come over and watch this? It's not Conor and Diaz. I get that. But on skill level versus skill level, Ferguson versus Lee is as good as you're going to get for the rest of this year outside of Cody Garbrandt, TJ Dillashaw, which in my opinion is my favorite fight of 2017 before it even happens. I mean, I'm so freaking jazzed for that fight. But outside of that, Ferguson versus Lee is that good. I told Kevin Lee that. We had him on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I said I'm legit serious when I say your fight and this fight with Cody and TJ are my two favorite fights for the remainder of the year. Now, that may change a little bit if Max Holloway ends up fighting Frankie Edgar, as rumors are persisting for UFC 218 in Detroit. That's a great matchup. I make no bones about it. Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar, two of my favorite fighters in the sport. That's a tremendous matchup, but
Definitely.
It's not signed right now, so until it's signed, Ferguson versus Lee is a damn good fight. Look at what Kevin Lee did to Michael Chiesa. You know what I mean? Talked all that trash, talked all that smack, and then went out there and just assassinated the dude inside one round.
Now, that was a little controversial.
It was, but
I would like to see
it was a little controversial.
them run that back.
It was a little controversial in terms of stoppage, but when you think about the dominance up to that point, really what we're talking about with that stoppage wasn't, the stoppage came down to, did the referee stop it too early, or should Kevin Lee have held on until he was completely choked out? He didn't get there by accident, though. It wasn't like he was getting his ass whooped and he caught him in the guillotine and he ended up finishing the fight. Kevin Lee was winning that fight dominantly, and the referee just kind of robbed him of a definitive win. But ultimately, he won the fight. But he did everything he said he was going to do. He went out there, he charged across the octagon, he got Chiesa down, he went and took his back almost immediately. Yeah. And Chiesa is a high-level grappler. Very high-level grappler. You know what I mean? This is a guy who out-grappled Beneil Dariush, who is a legit badass, who is also fighting this weekend, by the way. So, yeah, I love this fight. I love Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson. This is a great matchup. Great main event. It doesn't have that star power necessarily, but in terms of in terms of fighter versus fighter, you're not going to get much better than this.
I'm excited. I mean, there's other fights on that card too. Isn't Tavares on the card?
He's on the undercard. Yeah,
it's like
Tavares.
on the prelims.
Yep, on the Fight Pass prelims.
And who's he fighting?
Oh God, why am I not thinking of who he's fighting? I knew he's fighting, and Walt Harris is fighting on the undercard. There were days when I could literally
just get this card up for you, sir.
Where I could name you the entire card from top to bottom, but I lost that ability. Deal. I'm old. See,
Talis Leites.
Yes,
yeah, look at this. That's a big fight, man.
Yeah, that's a good fight. Like I said earlier, Beneil Dariush taking on Evan Dunham. That's a fun fight. Obviously you got Demetrius Johnson going for the record against Ray Borg. I mean, this is a card that I guarantee you is not going to do well on pay-per-view.
Will Brooks, Nik Lentz,
who we're going to be talking to in just a few minutes here. Will Brooks on the show. I love talking to Will Brooks, one of my favorite interviews in the sport. Guy is so well-spoken, understands the sport so well. And just a great dude to talk to. I always like getting him on the podcast. He's a guy who came over to the UFC from Bellator, former Bellator world champion, hasn't quite lived up to expectations yet. And he's a guy who will admit that. But I think this is an interesting matchup. Nik Lentz, former American top team guy, left the team recently, had some, kind of bad things to say about them, left the team. Now there's a little bit of pride on the line here. Will Brooks still at ATT, taking on the former ATT guy, so a little bit of pride on the line in this one.
And that's always fun with the American top team for sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Let's check that out, man. You and Will Brooks.
Yeah, let's talk to Will Brooks. As UFC 216 fast approaches, one of my favorite guests to get on the show before his fights, he returns to action next weekend. Out of American Top Team, taking on a former American Top Team fighter in Nik Lentz. Let's welcome back to the show, Will Brooks. Will, what's going on, man? How's everything?
Everything's great, man. I'm living a good life, man. I can't complain. How are you?
I'm good, man. I got to ask before we get too deep in the interview, how was everything down in Florida with you with the whole, the hurricane madness down there? I know a lot of people at ATT State, and I heard the area didn't get hit too bad, but how were you and your family?
Yeah, me and my family actually ended up leaving. We went up to Georgia, Alpharetta, Georgia, where to my mother-in-law's place, and it was just something that I didn't want to risk, especially with my wife and my daughter, and we ended up getting enough supplies to where if something did happen, we'd be fine with being able to stay home. But I was just like, you know what? It's like an 8-hour drive. Let's just take the drive. And luckily it was taking place during the weekend. So we were just like, you know what? Let's just take this 8-hour drive, go out there. If a hurricane comes, whatever, we're away from it, we're safe. If not, we just got a weekend away from Florida for a short vacation, you know. So we kind of just kind of killed two birds with one stone in a way.
Yeah, better safe than sorry with something like that, man. You don't want to mess around, especially when you got a family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely, man. But overall, I think this area did pretty well. You know, our neighborhood did pretty well. We had a couple of trees that got knocked down and a wooden fence that got knocked down, which is normal. It's typical. The wooden fences go take the hits for every single time, so you're gonna lose the wooden fence. But other than that, everything is good, man. Everybody's safe, everybody's protected, everybody's healthy.
That's what I like to hear, man. I'm glad to hear it. So, Will, obviously, fight's just around the corner. I know you're excited to get back in action. Yeah. American Top Team is always busy down there, but I follow you on Twitter and I've seen some of the things you're saying. I mean, kind of give me your mental state. You're kind of where you're at right now going into this fight with Nik Lentz.
Yeah, I'm totally clear of mine. I'm a type of guy that I don't dwell on anything. I recognize the situation. I'm 1-2 in the UFC right now. It's not an ideal situation that I wanted to be in, but it is the situation I'm in, and it's up to me to take care of the responsibility of putting things back on track. It's my responsibility, and I take full responsibility for my last two performances and being where I'm at, which is 1-2, and I'm totally clear of mine. I'm refocused. I feel as though I'm back to being the old Will Brooks. I think I've made a lot of adjustments and tried to do a lot of evolving to the point where I kind of got away from things that I'm accustomed to as far as my style of fighting and my style of competing. And I got away from some of those things. And, I've just gone back to the drawing board and going back to some of the old things that I feel comfortable with and trying to just bring back some things that I used to do and just get back out there and perform at a high level.
Yeah. It's not my job in any way, shape, or form to make excuses, for any kind of a loss or an off night at the office, so to speak. But when you look at those couple of losses, I mean, and then you look at the way you are now and maybe, some of your biggest wins, let's say, Michael Chandler, some of those, do you recognize the two guys? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, do you see the same fighter in that, or do you feel like there were some differences in those couple of fights that you lost?
I wouldn't say it was a difference in regards to the guys that I was competing with. Again, these are all high-level guys, talented fighters, so I'll never take anything away from those guys. They went out there and they did what they had to do, they came out victorious, and I'll never take that away from anybody. It is what it is. But I don't see any differences in regards to what those guys are doing. I see the difference in myself more than anything, because at the end of the day, it comes down to me. And me coming in and going into these training camps and doing the work in the gym and holding myself accountable when it comes to training and then going out there and competing at a high level. So I'll always hold myself accountable, and I'll never make excuses. And I think these guys I wouldn't put so much on what they do as their talents, or if it's a higher intensity or anything of that nature. I think it's just one of those things where I myself haven't made the proper adjustments that I've needed to make in regards to finding a balance between my new lifestyle of being a father and a husband, and finding a balance between being a fighter. I haven't done the right things. I haven't taken the right steps to find that balance. And by doing so, I put a lot more of my effort and my time into taking care of my wife and daughter, which I should be doing, which in a way kind of took away from my training, my mindset, my motivation. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just at the end of the day, you still got to go out there and be a fighter and compete. So, again, I take nothing away from those guys. They did their jobs. They took care of business. It's all on me, and I take full responsibility and hold myself accountable for not getting it done,
Yeah. Well, when you have a wife and a kid, I mean, I say this to fighters all the time when, they have their first kid, maybe I'll hear about the pregnancy or whatever, and I'll always ask them, and this is a true statement, is that when you have a kid, you have a family, you begin to fight for something different. It's a different feeling than what you fought for before. And I imagine that's just an adjustment you have to make. And there's no right or wrong answer that it takes 2 weeks or it takes 10 years. Like, there's just no right or wrong answer of how long it's going to take you to make that adjustment. But it sounds like you feel like you've made those changes in your head and in your training, and it feels like you have struck that balance. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. I thought I made that balance. I thought I had the balance between being, the new lifestyle and, going from fighting in my previous organization and moving over to the UFC and, getting married and all these different things going on. I I thought I had the good balance between the two worlds of being at home and being in the gym, and I guess I didn't, and this after these past few fights and these last couple fights, my coaches have sat me down, and even my wife has sat me down, and they've all expressed to me that it was one of those things where they recognized that I wasn't balanced. I was working overtime, spreading myself thin and not recognizing that I was, that I had people around me that was willing to help me, find a balance between the two, that recognized that I was going through something new in my life. Because long story short, I've gone through struggles. The majority of my life has been struggle. All the victories that I've had has been motivated off of being bitter and upset and angry and being, why does that guy have this and I don't have this, and all those things. So when you have that taken away, and all of a sudden you're in a happy place, you have your wife, your daughter, your house, you have money to take care of your bills, you have all these different things. Now that previous motivation of being bitter and angry and having a chip on your shoulder, it kind of lessens a little bit. And now you have to stop and realize that this new motivation, which is being a responsible father and a husband and taking care of my wife and my daughter, that's the new motivation. And I didn't find that balance. And my coaches, my wife, and everybody that are close to me have recognized that, and they've done incredible jobs at making sure that I recognize it and that I'm doing the things that I have to do to get back into being a fighter, and letting that itself build itself and then pour over into my outside life, which is, the way that you do it, you blend everything together,
Yeah. It's kind of, this is going to sound like a funny analogy, but it's the best one I can come up with. But it's kind of like a musician, when you're writing songs about, despair and heartbreak and things like that, and you make it big on that. And then, you get married, you have kids, and you're a happy guy, your happy life, what you're writing in your songs are probably not the same thing. And people would notice that, and they say, hey, what happened to those, sad love songs you used to write? Now you're all happy, and like, what's going on? Like, I imagine it's kind of the same thing for a fighter. And I know it sounds funny, but I mean, that's what you know what I mean?
That's funny. I never even thought about that, but it's funny you mentioned that, because I always make a joke. I'm sure you know who Adele is, right? Everybody knows who Adele is, right? I always make this joke that, so majority of her music, majority of her songs are sad songs about her breaking up with boyfriends, all this stuff, right? And I always make this joke of like, man, once she's done, like she's married now, she's got a kid, I'm like, oh, she's done. Her singing career is over. It's a wrap, So it's funny that you say that, because now that I sit back and I think about it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I think I'm Adele. I'm Adele right now. So I got to kind of flip the switch and get back on top of things,
Yeah, that's funny. Let me ask you, well, now that you kind of have everything right, in your head and the balance is struck, and you mentioned the conversation you had with your coaches, because I know how close you are and what a big part of the team you are down there at American Top Team. And I don't know, you tell me, does this fight feel a little more special to you, a little closer to your heart, because you are taking a former teammate? Nik Lentz is a guy who trained at American Top Team for quite a while. He ended up leaving, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I mean, is there a little part of you that's maybe not only fighting for yourself, but maybe for a little bit of that American Top Team pride in this one?
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it, but for me, this fight is close to my heart just because of my coaches, really, and the way that they've gone all in with me, and even after my last fight, none of my coaches said anything. All my coaches put it on themselves and took responsibility for themselves, and I never even got a chance to even say anything. I literally was in the locker room, and all my coaches like, listen, Will, this is on us. We should have did the things to make sure that you recognize it. Just that type of thing, for them to actually go outside of themselves and, express themselves in that way. And the time that they've put into me in regards to rebuilding and getting myself back into the right mindset to go out there and compete at a high level, it's just been incredible, man. And that for me is the thing that is like really motivating me in this fight coming up, and again, my wife and my daughter, of course, that's automatic, but just the way that my coaches have carried themselves, and the space that they gave me after that fight to kind of refocus my mind, and the time and they took to sit me down and really let me know what they recognized, and the time that they put in is really what's motivating me in regards to this fight. So I'm really excited to get out there and not just perform for myself and perform for my wife and my daughter, but go out there and perform at a high level for my coaches, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this, Will, because, American Top Team is a very big gym. I was down there a few months ago when I was doing some stuff with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and I knew American Top Team was big. I'm not dumb, but it's kind of funny when you say teammates, because I saw a lot of the some of the women training with other women. I saw Joanna training with different women. Not everyone trained together, so I imagine you could be at the same gym and never really even cross paths with somebody else in your division. But how well did you know Nik Lentz when he was there? Like, did you guys train together? Like, how well did you know him?
Yeah, that was one thing that really surprised us when this fight was offered, and when Nik Lentz took this fight was. We have trained extensively together. We've trained a lot together since I've been at ATT. We've had our small group, and this is what happens in a gym like ATT. You typically have guys that are maybe similar in work ethic and things like that, and you start putting those people together and partnering those guys up. And Nik Lentz was in that group of guys that I would work with every so often. I'd help him with training camps, and he'd help me with training camps whenever we needed to help each other, or we'd be training, So it is definitely one of those situations where you have worked with a guy for a long period of time. I think I've been at ATT for about 5 or 6 years now, and I think out of maybe 3 or 4 of those years, I worked pretty closely with Nik Lentz and a handful of other guys that I continue to work with, But yeah, this is a very interesting situation to be in. I would definitely, that it's going to happen at some point. People go in different directions. They find new gyms. They do different things, and you kind of figure it's going to come about sometime. But this one kind of came up pretty quick, because I think he's only been gone for about a few months. I don't know how long he's been, but it hasn't been a very long time. But it's just interesting. But I'm motivated to get out there. I'm not really thinking about what we did as teammates or whatever. I'm not thinking about any of that. I see a guy that is an opponent. I see an opponent. I see a guy that trains at another gym, and I'm going to go out there and represent ATT at the highest level possible,
Yeah. This is a sticky question because when you're in the gym, and you're helping each other train, you're never doing it with the intention of, like, I'm going to hold back because I might fight this guy one day. I understand that's not how it works, but at the same time, and I also understand what happens in the gym isn't always necessarily what happens in the fight. I've seen it happen where I watched a guy in training, I'm like, man, he's having a rough day of it. Then he comes out in the fight, he looks like a freaking hurricane. You know what I mean? So you just can't ever predict. But without giving away any secrets, like how do you approach this fight? Knowing that you know Nik so well, and hypothetically he probably knows you pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I approach it as exactly, to be honest, like, you don't want to do this, but at the same time, I do recognize, I do piece things together, I watch a lot of tape on Nik Lentz because, just like you said, there's things that we do in the gym that we don't do in fights. There's things that we do in the fights that we don't do in the gym. You carry yourself different because in that atmosphere of having 4-ounce gloves on, there's some things that you do differently. You're a little bit more cautious. You're a little bit more aware of what's going on. But in the gym, there's some things that you might do. You might uncork a couple punches. You might let a few punches ride and a few knees ride and things like that, and do a few techniques that you might not do in the fight, but I am recognizing the fact that I have seen the best of Nik Lentz, like the things that he is really comfortable with doing. I know those things. I know what he does, and I know his temperament. I know his mindset. I know the energy that he brings when he is in the gym or during training camps, because these during training camps are the times where you're really getting into that fight mindset. So I've been around him when he's in those type of situations and had to feel his energy and recognize his character and things like that. So going into this fight, I will definitely be recognizing some of the things that I've trained with him and seeing him do and recognize his strengths and weaknesses. And again, there might be different things that he's learned since he's been at a new gym. There's some new things that he's probably picked up along the way, but you don't teach an old dog new tricks. They say, the old dogs don't learn new tricks or whatever you say, however you say it. But I think he's an older guy in this fight game, and I think he's on a little bit on the back end of his career. And what typically happens with guys like that, they resort to back to the things that they normally do. They know how to do, and I think that's one thing that we'll be aware of. So we're going to make him uncomfortable, and make him go back to some of the things that he typically does, and will be strong in those positions,
Yeah. Is there a part of you in your head, Will, as you go into this fight, because it is a moment for you where you talked about, you kind of got your head right, you kind of struck that balance, and obviously this is the guy you used to train with. Is this in your head? And I don't want to put pressure on you going into the fight, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, do you feel like this is the moment where UFC fans, not necessarily people that saw you in your other organization, but in UFC, this is the first time we're going to see the real Will Brooks? Like, is there any part of that as you go into this fight where you kind of get everything right, and now it's like you finally get to shine?
Yeah, definitely, man. And I honestly, I've been, so focused on it, so motivated, so excited. That's the most exciting part about it, especially, again, like we referenced, like when you're in a gym, things are different in the gym. You can do everything correct in the gym, and you can show up to these fights, and then you just fall flat, But I've just had this feeling throughout this training camp, and even with my coaches, and look, at ATT, and you've been around the coaches at ATT, they don't pull punches on anybody. They're not here to, puff you up and pat you on the back every opportunity to get. They don't do that. So when the coaches do come up to you and say, hey, they're really excited about things that you're doing, really excited about some of the things that you've been bringing back to the table, that lets me know that I'm doing something right. That lets me know that, man, you know what, I'm back. I'm back to life. I'm coming back to life. And October 7th, I'm going to put it on display. And again, when my coaches, because I never pat myself on the back. I'll never pat myself on the back. I'm very critical of myself. I don't care if I have a good day. I'll always find something that I need to continue to work on. But the people like Coach Conan, Mike Brown, Dean Thomas, these coaches, I'm over here name dropping, but it's hard not to when you have a gym full of incredible coaches, But when these guys come up to you, these are guys that don't pat nobody on the back about what you do in the gym. But when they come up to you and they break character and they look you in the eye and they say, hey, I'm so excited to see you back, to see you again, and you realize that they're not saying like, oh, I'm happy to see you as a person, but they're like, I'm excited to see this Will Brooks again. I'm excited to see Will Brooks. You're back to who you need to be. So I'm very excited about putting that on display in that octagon October 7th. And unfortunately for Nik Lentz, he's kind of put himself in the line of fire. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put on a show on his account, and I'm gonna send him home.
Yeah, I love it. You're getting me excited right now. I'm like, man, is it October 7th yet? Come on now. I'm waiting for this show. Come on.
Man, I'm ready. I'm ready to go, man. Like I said, when my coaches get excited and I'm just walking around, because I'm a yes, sir guy. I'm a yes, sir guy. Whenever my coaches tell me to do something, I say yes, sir, and I keep it moving. I go do it to the best of my ability. So when my coaches come up to me and I'm standing there and I'm like, what's up, coach? And they say, literally don't give me no tips and just say, Will, I'm so excited for you. I'm so happy to see you back. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hell yeah, let's go, man.
I love it. Well, Will, I always appreciate taking the time, man. I'm super excited to see you back in there. If you walk out to Adele, it might be a little strange, but, I'd understand it. But as always, man, I appreciate taking the time. Obviously, safe travels out to Vegas, man. Best of luck in the fight, and I always appreciate taking the time for me.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate the help. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Tom Petty, gone at the age of 66. Awesome interview there with Will Brooks.
Good stuff from Will. Always like catching up with them. Takes on Nik Lentz on the FX prelims.
Yeah, what's up with this, man? Why is everything shifting? Now things are on FX, and then they had a new one like FX, like porn, XXX, FX. Like, what's the deal with these guys?
Yeah, the FX one is not that unsettling because FX is obviously a very big network. What it all comes down to are contracts with, baseball being on FS1, I'm assuming. It's obviously coming up in playoff time, so it's baseball time. But, September 30th just passed us, and September 30th was the deadline. The exclusive negotiating period, between the Fox and UFC has come to an end. So now, now it's open season, which means anybody and everybody can make a bid on the UFC's television rights.
So are they trying to lowball them or what?
No, I didn't think they were going to get a deal done during this time anyways. What the exclusive negotiating period really comes down to is Fox making an offer and the UFC saying we're going to take it or leave it. I don't think it's a lowball offer. What I think it ultimately comes down to is the UFC was probably going to turn down just about anything because they want to see what else is out there. I mean, that's just part of negotiating. You don't take the first offer that's thrown to you. You know what I mean? Like, when you negotiate a contract, even as an employee, you and I, if somebody says, "Hey man, I'm going to pay you, $50,000 a year." All right. Well, I could live on $50,000 a year. That's pretty good. But let me weigh my options. And maybe somebody else comes in with an offer for $70,000 a year. And so, that's ultimately what it comes down to. I never thought they were going to re-up with Fox during this negotiating period. They may have a great partnership and they may stay with Fox ultimately, but they're going to see what else is out there. They're going to play the field. This is the nature of free agency. We always talk about fighters getting into free agency and testing the waters and, seeing what you're worth on the open market and what guys like, Rory McDonald and guys like that have cashed in on versus other guys like, like a Joe Duffy who just re-signed with the UFC or something like that. You got to see what's out there. And so that's what this is going to be. This is going to be a time for the UFC to get offers from people like NBC and Turner and Amazon, who I think is going to be a serious player in these television rights deals.
Amazon, huh?
Yeah,
Wouldn't that be weird?
Amazon, at least for a part of it. So they're gonna start taking some offers, and I think you're gonna start. It's gonna take some time. I don't think we're gonna have resolution necessarily by the end of this year, but I think early next year we're gonna start to see some things really start to come together because obviously the TV deal runs through 2018, so they have Fox through 2018, and then they gotta figure things out. Are they gonna stay with Fox? Or are they gonna move to a different network? My gut says they're gonna move to a different network.
And do you think Showtime would play a hand?
See, I had somebody tell me about Showtime the other day too.
Steven Espinoza.
See, I think people discount how little Dana White gets along with Showtime. Like, people forget Strikeforce was on Showtime and how volatile that relationship was. And also, the thing with Showtime, as much as Showtime, Steven Espinoza may say, well, we'd be crazy not to make a bid on the UFC. He doesn't make that decision. Les Moonves, the guy who runs CBS, is the one who's going to make that decision. And from my understanding, CBS isn't interested in the UFC. Now, that could change. Obviously, the landscape of television changes every day. They could decide tomorrow, hey, we've got the CBS All Access, we've got the CBS Sports Network. We want to get the UFC and build our network the way that they built FS1.
It's not like they're uninterested in mixed martial arts because they carry several regional promotions on CBS Sports. And they were also home to the Elite XE at one time.
There are, but there's a big difference between that and spending $450 million a year to get the UFC.
No doubt.
So
definitely would give them an advantage.
From my understanding, CBS is not one of the players involved. Now, again, that can change. I mean, that's part of television rights deals, and things come out of left field. But from my understanding, they're not interested. And as much as everyone wants to tout Steven Espinoza's power, and he absolutely does have power, he's not the one who's going to ultimately make that decision.
That's a Les Moonves.
Yeah, that's a Les Moonves decision.
I worked in the radio division, and he made all the decisions in the radio division. I mean, there were bosses, but, Les runs that company.
Yeah, so that's going to come down to whether or not he wants the UFC. And I've heard that, they don't want to get involved in that business. So I think NBC will be a player. I think Turner will be a player. I mean, they've got TNT, TBS, True TV. I think that's a possibility.
There's a time slot like the UFC, 8:35, right after Andy Griffith.
Exactly. Take over WCW's old spot. That's a possibility, and I think Amazon is a player as well. And I wouldn't discount. I said this. I did an article last week, but Apple's getting involved in television. They're doing an original programming side of their business now, and they're going to start live streaming sports on the new Apple TV. Now, they haven't said that they're interested in exclusive live streaming sports. What they're really talking about right now is live streaming from other people's apps. Like if you want to watch ESPN or you want to watch, Fox or whatever app is on Apple TV, you can stream it and, they're setting it up for a sports tab. But Apple has, I think last time I checked, more than $250 billion in just loose cash. Like they just have it on hand. I mean, they could pay for the UFC. They could pay the UFC $350 million a year, like with their pocket change. You know what I mean? So I don't discount
Seems
Apple.
Like a great problem to have.
Yeah, so I don't think Apple getting involved is out of the question, especially considering the youth demographic that the UFC has. When you also tack that on top of there's no other major sports rights coming up until 2021. The UFC kind of is in a good position, even though right now this year has not been a great year for the UFC, and it's not probably going to close out in a great year because Conor probably isn't going to come back till next year, but. With all that said, they can still cash in with the big TV deal because there's going to be a need for UFC type programming, and that's why I think Fox has to make a play on this, if they lose the UFC, FS1 has their programming is gutted without the UFC. But at the same time, the UFC can look at FS1 and say, okay, when we were on Spike, they were, routinely getting 1 or 2 million viewers, per event because Spike was a bigger network. It was more well known. They helped launch FS1. And while it has grown and they do get shows over 1 million views, it's not quite what it once was. So you wonder, if they get a deal with an NBC, and NBC's willing to put them on NBC, a network, more often, or, they have NBC Sports Network, which is not as big as FS1. So I think the UFC's got to weigh, what they want to do. Are they going to continue to build FS1 and make that their permanent home? Are they going to want to build another network like NBC Sports Network, which is growing but not quite as big? Do they want to? I think what I would like to see personally, I would like to see them split a 3-way broadcast deal. I would like to see them do some sort of deal with Fox, so they stay with Fox, or NBC, network, and then they do a deal with HBO.
That would be sick.
HBO knows how to do sports. You know what I mean? HBO production for the big cards.
That would put them in direct competition then with your buddy over at CBS.
No, exactly. They need it. HBO boxing is dead. They have Canelo, and that's about it.
And that ship is sailing fast, that's for sure.
They need something to inject some life into their sports programming, and the UFC would be great. I know HBO has been interested before. Obviously, HBO is dealing right now with the AT&T, merger. AT&T has networks on DirecTV, with audience and things like that. There's just something about this. I feel like the UFC is going to end up coming to a deal where they're going to be on multiple networks. Even though I know for a fact the UFC ultimately would like to stay on one network. They would like to be with one place versus 3 places. But I think this new deal is going to be very interesting because they could do part of the deal with Fox, they could do part of the deal with HBO, and they could also do part of the deal with Amazon. I think these streaming services are going to get involved. I have a hard time believing Amazon or Facebook or Apple, one of these streaming services, are going to throw some money at the UFC, even if it's just for part of the package, even if it's just for, 8 cards a year. Something tells me they're going to get involved.
All right, well, let's pick some of these fights coming up for Saturday. Where do you want to start at? You want to start the top 3 or what?
Let's do the top 3. You got your boy Derrick Lewis against Fabricio Werdum right there.
Black Beast all day. I got to go Black Beast every time. Derrick Lewis, I think he's hungry. I think he's ready to go. I think Fabricio is always dangerous and can change that fight at the drop of a hat. But I think I'm going to go with Derrick Lewis.
Yeah, I'm going with Derrick Lewis as well in the upset. I think his power, and I think, he's put a lot of time into his training. As you heard on the interview, he talked about how serious he's taking his training, his nutrition, and all those kind of things. And there's just something about this matchup. Verdum didn't look great against, Overeem in his last fight. He didn't look great against Travis Brown. He looked okay, but that was kind of an ugly fight as well. And there's something about this fight that I feel like there's an upset brewing.
I don't think there's any question that Mighty Mouse takes Ray Borg, in the co-main.
Yeah.
Retaining the championship and then wondering who's going to ever beat this guy.
I like Ray Borg a lot, but I just don't think Ray Borg is the guy to get the job done. You got Sergio Pettis fighting Henry Cejudo coming up. Henry looked great in his last fight. Sergio Pettis has looked really strong right now. I don't know that either one of them are going to be any better suited to beat Demetrius Johnson.
Did Cejudo already lose to Mighty Mouse?
He did,
right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And he's come back. Obviously, he's only
that was early on his career, right?
Well, yeah, and that was part of my argument. I never thought he should have got the title shot in the first place. It was just pretty much out of necessity because Mighty Mouse had beaten everybody else. You know what I mean? And I think that was too early on in Cejudo's UFC career to really give him that.
Is that in Australia or something like that? I think.
No, that was they fought Cejudo and Mighty Mouse fought in the same card as OSP and John Jones.
Gotcha.
Yeah. They did the original flyweight tournament part of it took place in Australia. I remember that. But there's just nobody that I'm going to look at on paper and say they're favored to beat Mighty Mouse right now. I think that's why everyone was so curious about that TJ Dillashaw matchup, because people wouldn't immediately pick Demetrius to win that fight. There are going to be a bunch of fans and a bunch of critics and a bunch of experts, whatever you want to call them, who would have picked TJ Dillashaw to win that fight. We don't have that right now with Demetrius Johnson. Look at that flyweight list from 1 to 15 and tell me that there's one guy on paper that should beat Demetrius Johnson. There's not. Just not. And that takes some of the excitement out of a fight, and just...
No, I agree. I think I think they did the right thing with that fight. They put it on a card. It makes the card stronger, but it's not hanging on that moment that's going to be the main event. So the main event, of course, Tony Ferguson taking on Kevin Lee. Listen, I lean towards Tony Ferguson in this fight. I think he's a nasty, gritty fighter. I think he's got the octagon experience. I think it's going to be a great fight, though. I think 5 rounds, it's going to be nothing short of exciting. And I really do hope the winner gets Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think, listen, in terms of, the division, I think the winner should fight Conor. In terms of money, Conor and Diaz is still the bigger fight, but we'll see how it all plays out. Conor's kind of stayed, when Conor did his interview last week in Scotland, he kind of stayed aloof and said he's going to wait and see how things play out. I think that's also a negotiating tactic. Nothing Conor does or says is never without a negotiation in mind. You know what I mean? If he says something like, I'm going to keep my eye on this fight, that's his way of kind of needling Nate Diaz to say, you better sign this deal because you're going to miss out on another, $10 million payday if you don't step up.
That will never come again.
Yeah.
Because who else is he going to fight for that much money?
Nobody.
So what's your official pick? You're going to go who?
I'm going with Tony Ferguson, but it's a tough one. I'm going with Tony Ferguson. I think the experience, and I think he does have the wrestling and the striking to negate a lot of what Kevin Lee does well on the ground. I think Kevin Lee is a beast, but I think Tony Ferguson ultimately gets it done by decision. What about you?
Yeah, I go Tony Ferguson. That's what I was saying. I think, his all-around game is just, it presents itself in a better way. Yeah. I think Tony Ferguson for the win, but I think Tony gets the stoppage. I don't think it's going to be a decision.
Yeah. We'll see.
I say round 4. I say round 4.
It's a great card. I really enjoy this card. It's not a star-studded card, but I enjoy this card.
I enjoy you, sir. I enjoy this podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe to us on iTunes. You can find us on YouTube, and also check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Damon Martin, at Jeremy Loper. You can check out my website, Loper and Randy, Randy with an I, RANDI.com, Loper and Randy. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. We're back next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week.
Fight Society.
Go. Check it out.
You're listening to Fight Society with Damon Martin and Jeremy Loper.
Check it out.